This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. This week, I'm joined by someone who is truly changing the game when it comes to mental wellness and personal growth in agriculture. Kacee Bohle is a fourth-generation farm kid from Indiana, a homeschool mom, and the founder of AGRIMINDS, a coaching platform built specifically for folks in ag who are ready to grow with intention. After spending years in corporate America, Kacee made the leap into entrepreneurship and hasn't looked back. In part one of our two-part conversation, Kacee shares how her personal journey from rural roots to professional reinvention led her to a life of coaching, mentorship, and deep connection with the ag community. We talk about general dynamics on the farm, redefining success, and how burnout often shows up when we're doing too much of the wrong stuff. She's passionate about helping ag professionals set boundaries, get clear on their values, and stop spinning their wheels trying to do everything. It's a powerful conversation that will leave you feeling seen, supported, and a little more grounded in your own journey. And just a heads up, part two of our conversation drops next week, so be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen so you do not miss it. Without further ado, my friends, here's part one of my conversation with Kacee. Kacee, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
So good. Thank you for having me on.
I am so excited to see you, to meet you, and to be able to share your story with my audience and all of the really neat things that you are doing for agriculture. So tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
Yeah, so my name is Kacee Bohle, and I am in West Central Indiana. Grew up on a row crop farm. We raised corn and soybeans, and have been in the ag industry my entire career. I worked professionally in the industry for just about 15 years. And then back in 2023, left corporate America and started my own coaching and training business.
Very cool. And this is all very high level. I want to dive into all of the things. So tell me more about the farm that you grew up on.
So it's fourth generation. My dad's side, and I was one of four daughters, three daughters now remaining. And I thought that I was going to come back home to the farm and do all the things. And turns out it's just not as easy as that. And so I was one of those kids that experienced what it's like to come back to the farm and realize there's not quite a place for you right now. We aren't a huge farm. Like I said, we farm corn and soybeans. And so during the busy season, we need the extra help. But on the off season, there wasn't a whole lot for us. We don't have livestock anymore. That was all done and gone before I was around. When my dad was a kid, that's when we had livestock. And so it was a kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, we know you need extra help here and I want to be available for you, but like, what do I do in summer? What do I do in winter? And so that's when I had to go and get a big kid job, like in town, right? And do all that. So today, my husband and I still help out on the family farm, but it's just my mom and dad running the show now. And my sisters help out now and then as well.
I think, those are important conversations to have about those multi-generational farms and the realities of coming back to the farm and it not essentially being able to support other families. It's not just you yourself coming, it's your husband, it's children, it's a next generation. Talk to me about having those conversations at the young age that you were coming back to the farm and saying, hey, I want to do this, but it not being viable for you to do.
Oh, it was so hard. I was the daughter that was by my dad's side all growing up. And then my sisters were, either with my mom or whatever. My oldest sister, she's the one who's passed away. She was the one that was kind of like the black sheep and wasn't really at home. She kind of did her own thing. She was much older than all of us, right? And my two other sisters were with my mom quite often. I was the middle child and kind of clung to my dad. So I was the daughter that went to the farm. We went and checked fields. I was always riding around with my dad and my grandpa. And so I just thought, I don't have any brothers. My other sisters are not interested in the farm. If I don't take this farm over when it's my chance, then it's done. All these generations ahead of me that have built this farm up to what it is today, I just put that responsibility on my shoulders of it's up to me. And I carried that weight and that expectation and that responsibility around for years. And I mean, all growing up, that's what I wanted to do. I was going to come back home and I'm going to run the farm and I'm going to be the farmer, right? I know what I'm doing. I have a passion for it. Like this, let's go. And then, so when I graduated from college, I came home and I said, hey, I've got this fancy ag degree. I have all these ideas. I have the drive. And my dad and my grandpa were like, that's great. So go clean out the grain bin. You can go put the new sweeps on the cultivator, like gave me all the grunt jobs. And I was kind of mad about it because I was like, no, like I'm ready. Like put me in the combine, put me in the tractor, like give me the captain's chair. And it just didn't fit yet, right? Like I couldn't do that full time. There wasn't a need for me, let alone could they afford to pay me what I thought that I deserved, right? Like I was ready to spend money and I needed to make money. And so I went and got a job at the local John Deere dealership. And so I was a parts girl for 3 years and I did that on top of farming. So I went, worked at the dealership and then came home and farmed on nights and weekends. And it just kind of got to the point where I told my dad, I'm like, I'm exhausted, right? Like I came home, this is what I told you I wanted to do. But here I am, like it was like 23 at the time. And I'm like, I have been working my butt off at the dealership, coming home, farming, helping y'all. And I just cannot do this. Like I'm pooped. Like this is not what I envisioned life being like when I came home from college. And, he and I just sat down and I had started dating the guy that I dated in college again. So when I was in school, he and I got together. And when I graduated, I said, hey, see ya, like I'm not doing the whole long distance thing. I'm moving back home to the farm. It was kind of a mutual understanding. And then, 2 years had gone by and he and I had got reacquainted. And so I told my dad, like, I'm getting real serious about this guy. We're dating again. Like, there's a job opportunity in Missouri. So I'm in Indiana. There's a job opportunity in Missouri, which happened to be where my now husband grew up. And, I can go work for corporate Deere. And I was wrestling back and forth. And I was like, I think I'm in love with this guy. And I kind of want to go be with him. But I also have this job opportunity. But with that means I leave the farm. And I was so torn. And I was so just upended about everything. Cause I'm like, what do I do? Like I came home, I gave this farm a shot and I haven't, I've been here and I can't do this anymore. So I had to sit down with my dad, and finally we just kind of had that really rough conversation. He's like, you've got a 401k with John Deere already. You've made your mark. You can climb that ladder. You can start going. You are, into this guy over here. If you want to go give that a shot, like, I think you should go do that. And I was so mad. I was like, what do you mean I should go? Like, are you like, you don't want me here? It was so difficult to have that conversation. And to be honest with you, I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I didn't have a mentor because my mom and dad didn't go to college. They didn't work in corporate America. They hadn't gone through what our industry and being a female in this industry was like. Like, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody to talk to, which is ultimately, why I do what I do today, is because I want to be that person that helps, that is not financially or emotionally attached to the decisions that I make, to be in my corner. And so anyway, I was kind of just going off of my gut, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go. And I did it. And it wasn't easy, but looking back now after some conversations that I had, over the last 15 years, I realized that was the best thing that I could have done. But man, it was hard. It was really hard to do at the time.
Yeah. I'm over here, like, just jotting all of the notes down and all of the wisdom that you just spewed to us. And I say that in the best way, because the thing that I hear the most with especially the younger generation of farmers who want to take over their family farm is the expectations that they have themselves versus the expectations that the older generation has, and the unspoken expectations that are never said between the two. And what you and your dad did was so important. Those conversations are hard to have. Obviously, you are a college educated woman who is ready to come back to the farm, when I'm sure there were classmates that you had, or people growing up, even your own sisters. They're like, get me the hell out of here.
Yes.
And here you are, willing to come back and live this rough and tough lifestyle because you love it and because it means something to you. And you're faced with this adversity from people that you would think, well, why wouldn't you want me to come back? Why wouldn't you want this? There's so many layers here. And the biggest thing that I took is just that expectations conversation. So hard to have.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, if I pulled myself out of this situation and was watching somebody else, which happens often because my clients are usually always in this kind of same situation, it's a no-brainer, right? But being in it, being in the controversy, being in the mess of it all, you just cannot think clear-headed through it. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. And another thing that you had said earlier was, they just weren't ready for me yet. And I think that is such a great mindset to have. And I'm sure at the time, you're not thinking, oh, they're just not ready for me yet. You're thinking, what the heck? Like, why am I not in the driver's seat here making these decisions with all of these great ideas that I just learned, not knowing essentially what your dad or grandpa could have been thinking about the succession plan, the transition plan, or anything like that, or even if they had one. Right? But the piece of not being ready yet, I think that's such an important piece for the younger generation that think, oh, I just want to jump in. I just want to do this. It might not be ready yet. I think that's a key piece there. So tell us more about your career off of the farm and your career in corporate America after you had made that decision to leave the farm.
Yeah. I didn't ever think, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I didn't think much about that because I thought the no-brainer was I'm always going to come back to the farm. Like, that's really what I thought I was going to do. And so, I just happened to be going to town to get parts for our farm and was in there and overheard them talking about how they were hiring for the parts position. And so I was like, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm looking for a job. I think this is divine. Why don't y'all hire me? You guys know my family. I come from a hardworking background. Like, I've grown up going and visiting the parts counter my entire life, right? Like, these guys know me. they know I know what I'm talking about. And I had convinced them to hire me. So I got that job there. And that put me in a position where it was like somewhat customer service, but also sales, because I was doing some selling of lawn and garden stuff, or like the steel chainsaws and things. So I got a taste of selling. And so when I left the dealership and went to corporate John Deere, I was a regional sales manager, which meant I was kind of the liaison between the dealership and corporate. So I was teaching the dealership how to run the systems, how to file for warranties and claims, and train them on how to promote certain products or, push promotions, right? And so that kickstarted my job into sales. And I felt like every job that I applied for afterwards, I was like, it has to be sales. Like I was in the sales rut because that's what I had experience in. I didn't have experience in marketing, didn't have experience in advertising or anything. It was just always sales. And so I kind of like, I don't know, I was in this rut, and I applied for other types of jobs, but hey, you don't have the background, you don't have the experience. So I'd apply for another sales job, I'd get the sales job. And about every 2 years over this 15-year span, I job hopped. I was a career job hopper. I was so burnt out and miserable in like every job that I had by year 2. And I blamed the product. I blamed the coworkers. I blamed the company culture. I blamed the location. I mean, I was just like burnt out. I got really excited about the newness of a job. And then once I got in there and I like got it all figured out, by like year 2, I was like done. I was just burnt out. I was done. And then I finally just realized like something's not working, and I think it's me. And so I started applying for some different roles, and, I said, hey, what can I do? Can I like train? Like, what can I do to get in here? Because I'm stuck in this sales role. And so I finally ended up getting a position at a company where it was a buying role. So I was purchasing, doing forecasting and things like that. And if it was a trainee position, then after 18 months, you'd get moved into a full-time position. And I hated it. Oh my God, I was miserable. I was in an office crunching numbers in front of a computer all day. And I was like, this is so not what I thought it was going to be. In the mixture of all that, I had a kid, I got married, I was still 5.5 hours away from my mom and dad, so many other things that I was dealing with. But to get back to the original question about like my career and like, what did that look like? It was all over the place. I was miserable. I was job hopping. I was checking boxes. And I finally got a role where I was able to move back home. It was still a sales job. It was still a traveling job. I've pretty much worked from home my entire career. Like I traveled for a living. So I had a home office, but I finally had a position open up where it was in Indiana, and I could live about 3 miles from my mom and dad's house. And so I was like, let's go. So we finally moved back to Indiana. And once I got here, I realized like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so when I got back to Indiana, Purdue Extension had a leadership program through our county. And so I convinced my employer to pay for me to go through this program just to like maybe give me some kind of leadership experience that could put me in a manager position and get me out of the sales rut. And so I did that program, and it like opened up a whole new perspective, look at life. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. The thing that I've been craving has been personal growth and professional development. And I just didn't know there was a name for it. And so like, I just like dove into all of these, I wouldn't call them self-help books, but they kind of were. I loved the psychology behind it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense why I do this. That makes sense why I do that. Or that makes sense why so-and-so speaks this way and we continue to butt heads, right? Because we just don't have the same personality types. And so that's really where it kickstarted everything for me. And I'm like, oh, that's why my dad and I didn't see eye to eye on this. That's why I get really burnt out and frustrated when he assigns me this type of task, and why I really like doing this type of task. And it just like gave me a science and an explanation behind my feelings. And I'm a feelings person, which is not necessarily something that's always talked about in ag. Like I love talking about feelings. And anytime I say that, people are like, oh God, is she going to cry? Like, no, it's like, everything in our industry is emotion driven and nobody wants to talk about it. And so when I finally had this light bulb moment behind like why I feel the way that I feel, why I do the thing that I do, it made so much sense. And then that's what kickstarted my passion for coaching and ultimately led me to where I am today.
There are so many things in here that I'm resonating with. Absolutely. The piece where you're talking about how, feeling that unsettledness every 2 or so years and looking for somebody to blame, right, is something that I know I've experienced in life. And especially when I had my quote real job, even as an entrepreneur, I feel that unsettledness. And now knowing more psychology behind it and reasons why you feel that way, I love that you're able to look back and have a different perspective of it and being like, okay, this is maybe why I felt like this. How can I move forward and do things differently so I don't feel that unsettledness anymore? What is it that needs to happen in order to move forward? And the piece about emotions and loving to talk about emotions and feelings, I can just feel people clamming up right now. They're like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want my wife to talk about her feelings. I don't want my mom to tell me hers. My mother-in-law definitely don't care about her feelings. However, when we're talking about feelings in business, I feel like there has just been such a shift within the last, I don't know how long, of, feelings coming into business and those being accepted because we realize now that there are humans behind these screens. There are humans behind the decisions being made, and feelings are involved in business as much as we would like to say, like, you can't be successful in business if you bring emotion and feeling into it. I will throw my wallet at any business that tells me the why and the how and just the absolute passion behind what they do versus the people who are like, this is our product. This is how it's like, not even how it's made or anything. This is our product on the shelf. You should buy it because XYZ. There's no feeling behind it, right? Kacee, tell us about your current venture and what you have started for yourself.
Yeah. So a little bit of context as to why this started. So I mentioned I didn't really have somebody to go to when I was looking for support. I didn't feel like I had the tribe, right? Like around that time, everybody was like, find your tribe, find your tribe. And it just like really pissed me off. Like, if I'm just completely honest with you, it's like, stop. I live in the middle of nowhere. There's no tribe. Like, it takes me an hour to get to a legitimate town, right? Like, there's no tribe here. And the people that are close by in the small little podunk towns that are down the road, I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want them to know my business. Stop trying to tell me to find my tribe. And around that same time, Facebook groups were becoming more of a thing. And so I created a Facebook group that was just like, hey, if you're a woman in ag that wants to talk about personal and professional development and share resources and just kind of like be in a group together, come join this group. And I had like 400 people join in like the first week or so. And I was like, holy cow, like, I'm not the only one who has this need. And then I started to have a couple of messages from some males that I knew in the industry. And they're like, this sounds really cool, but I'm a guy. Can I still join? And I was like, oh, I got to rethink this, because I wanted to talk to other people who were going through the same things I were, right? Like taking over the farm. I'm not the male. I'm not the son. I'm not a male, in this industry. And so I had like this, not that I've ever had a victim mentality around this, because being a woman in ag has never meant anything to me. I'm a female who happens to be in ag. That's not a card I'm playing. But what I didn't have was somebody who knew what it was like to have a kid, like literally be pregnant on the job, right? Like it's a different perspective. I didn't have anybody who had gone through this, who was trying to climb this ladder. I just was looking for a mentor. I was not trying to play a card. I just want to make sure that's really clear. And I didn't have anybody to talk to. And the women that I did have that I could go to were mentors or peers, right? Like they were saying, this is what I've gone through. Here's my advice. and either do what I've done because it worked or don't do what I've done because it didn't work and I don't advise it. So learn from me, right? And I didn't want that. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want advice. I needed resources and I needed somebody to be in my freaking corner to help me figure out what I should do, not here's what you've done. And there is a difference. And I've learned this through the certifications that I've gone through. There is a big difference between being a mentor, being a consultant, being a counselor, and being a coach. Those are all very different hats. And a lot of people don't know the difference and they interchange them. And I didn't know the difference either, but I didn't know that that's the hat that I needed to find. That was the person that I needed. And so I created this Facebook group and I started getting all of these people messaging me because, I was the founder of the group. And so all of a sudden they thought I had answers. And so they were like, Kacee, who do you know in this group that does X? Or, hey, I want to apply for this job. Do you think you could help me with my resume? And I'm like, I don't have any idea how to do any of this. Like, I don't know what I have said to make you think that I am qualified to give you any sort of advice. But I didn't know what to do. Like, I was getting a lot of people in my inbox. And it was a little overwhelming because I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I'm not qualified. I have screwed up my own situation. Like, I don't have any advice for you. I'm failing, right? I came here to find the solution. And I found like all of a sudden I had a realization that that's how this has always been. I've always been the person, even in the checkout line at the store, somebody just opening up their heart to me in the middle of public. Like, I've just always been that person that people just feel like they can just let it all out with. And I'm like, okay, I hear you, God. Something's happening. I'm putting some pieces together. And I realize there's something I can do to help these people. And in that process of helping other people and by asking really good questions and getting really curious, it gave them the power to answer their own questions. It gave them the power to solve the thing that they were looking for without me having to do the work, having the responsibility of doing the work, and not taking credit away from them. And so turns out there's a term for that, and that's called coach. I learned that through all of this, learnings that I've done. And so I just wanted to provide the context, like what I do today purely came from the type of person I wish I had years ago. And so I went through the Purdue Extension Leadership Program, met some people who were a part of Maxwell Leadership. So John Maxwell's kind of like this, professional development, personal growth guru. And so I went through his program, became a certified leadership coach. I went through Ramsey Solutions, became a certified financial coach, because the conversations I was having with clients and the conversations I was having in this group all stemmed around those things. And I wanted to be able to talk about it knowledgeably. And I was still working full time. And then I got pregnant with baby number 2. And I kind of just had this nudge of like, why don't you test run your maternity leave and see if you can get some opportunities, paid opportunities. And if you can, this is going to be your sign that this is what you need to do full time. And so I did. And I made more money while I was on maternity leave than I did in my entire year's salary at my full-time job. And so when it came time for me to go back to work, my husband and I were like, you're silly for going back and doing a job that you just don't, you like, but it's not lighting you on fire. And then coming home, getting excited to do the thing that you've put off all day because this is your actual, side gig. And I was like, why wouldn't I turn my side gig into the thing I do every day, knowing I can make money at it, knowing it fills me up and brings me joy, and knowing that it's helping other people in the way that I so desperately wished I had. And so I just literally walked out on faith and said, okay, this is what I'm calling myself. This is what I'm doing. This is who I'm helping. Here's how I'm going to do it. And here we are going on, almost 2 years. And it has been the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life.
Kacee, I love every second of that. And in saying that, and very much feeling that pull, well, this is for me. And I'm curious if this is how you felt as well. You make the decision, I'm walking out, I'm going to do this thing. And then, 6 months goes by or a year goes by. Did you ever feel the pull, like, what the hell did I just do? I need to go find a real job.
Not quite that. I mean, the day that I was turning in my notice, and the day that was my actual last day, I was like, am I making the biggest mistake of my life? Like, I was making good money. I had a company truck. I had freedom and flexibility. I was working from home. The benefits were amazing. Like, it was a dream job on paper. But I just was, for some reason, not lit up about it. But I was so scared to actually pull the trigger because I'm like, I've never done this before. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. There's no way to know if this was a freak accident that happened over maternity leave or if this is something that's long-term and scalable, right? Like, I had no idea. And so I did it. And then the day that I woke up, that was like, okay, you're not an employee anymore. Like, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, where do I start? And so there was never a time that I thought I want to go back and work for someone. It has never crossed my mind that I wanted to go back and ever be an employee of anybody else's. Like, I don't think that I will ever have that thought of, I want somebody else to tell me what to do with my day. I don't think it's ever going to cross my mind again. But what I have had is, this is a slower month and I'm starting to panic because the income is not coming in the way that I thought it was. Or I have this employee mindset issue going on of like, am I being productive? Am I growing the way that I think I should grow? Like, it took me a while to unlearn employee mindsets and start actually having an owner mindset. And so that took me a while, but it never crossed my mind of like, oh my God, what have I done? I regret it. That's never crossed my mind. I feel like I'm exactly where I should be, but there have definitely been days where I'm like, okay, I need a sale, or like, I panicked around the financial side, but it's always ended up working out.
Yeah, that's amazing. You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. So you've taken different leadership courses and trainings throughout your time in your business. How have these different coaching programs and approaches meshed together to fit into the world of agriculture?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And that's why I've taken so many different ones, right? Like I said, I went through the leadership one, which is really focused on professional development, and there is some personal growth in there. And then I also took the financial coaching, and right now I'm getting ready to wrap up the CAP Institute, which is coaching in positive psychology. And I take all of those different areas and I tailor it and blend them together because agriculture is all of those things, right? Like, when you talk about, let's just say your farming operation, you're trying to communicate with your employees. Maybe you're trying to be as productive with your time as possible. You are also talking about your mindset. You're also talking about your financial decisions. Like, it's so holistic. And I know that there are other types of coaches out there who are like, I'm a mindset coach, I'm a business coach, I'm a body coach, I'm a divorce coach, or there's like all of these different niches that you can find. And I just say I'm an agriculture coach because I truly just want to help people in ag. And with that comes all of these different things. And so they're all intertwined. Now, depending on the client, we may lean heavier in one area or the other, but it's a holistic view. You're one person. You just happen to have these different roles and these different areas that you are involved in. So depending on your day, depending on the season or the situation, we may tap into a resource over in this category, or we may grab a tool from this category. But at the end of the day, you're one person and it's all encompassing. And so I take a very holistic approach. And that kind of used to be scary, to be honest with you, because I'm like, that's like life coaching, but I can't call myself a life coach in ag. People are going to think I'm some crazy lady and nobody's going to hire me. Right. And so that's where I came up with the term ag coach, which is essentially a life coach. I'm helping you with your life. But with that comes business too, right? Like, and so I help you. And if you own a business or if you have this, that is all included. But I help you essentially.
Right. And I love what you said about, I can't call myself a life coach in agriculture because they'll think I'm crazy. It's so funny to me from being from outside of the industry, coming in and just seeing kind of the stereotypes that we put on things like coaching or mentoring or whatever. You're like, I don't need that. My granddaddy's been a farmer for the last 100 years here. And like all of these things, there's so many stereotypes. But I feel as though we're learning more and more now about different ways to approach different groups of people, about bringing new ideas in. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, the big B word in agriculture, is burnout. And I want to talk to you about the issue of burnout in the agriculture industry, given we have so many long hours and constant demands. What are some of the signs that you have found in people that you've worked with that are signs of burnout in our industry?
If I'm honest with you, I get asked this question a ton. Like almost every podcast episode, or if I'm on a panel, that's like such a common thing. Or what are the signs of burnout? And could I give you like the textbook definition? Like I went through a mental health first aid training and there's like legitimate signs bullet pointed. But if I'm completely honest with you, based off of working with clients and finding the root cause of why they are the way that they are, every single person has a different set of signs externally. Internally, because I think that's the big piece is that we're skipping, is externally, we may look great, right? Like you may not know that these are signs of burnout. So externally, somebody else may not be able to pick this out that you're burnt out. But internally, so a self-evaluation is, do you love the things that you're doing every day? Right? Like that was the big sign for me, is something's not right. I am unsettled. Things are not working the way that I want them to work. I'm frustrated. I'm pissed off at my loved ones, and that's not right. That's not normal. Something is causing me to feel stressed out. And there's a difference between stress and burnout too, right? Something that a former coach of mine had said is burnout is not doing too much stuff. Burnout comes when you're doing too much of the wrong stuff. And I love that because I was like, wow, I think you're right. Like that, I am doing too much of the stuff that doesn't fill me up, or at least I'm doing more of the stuff that's bringing me frustration than I'm doing of the stuff that's bringing me joy. And it may not be much. It just may be like just a tick higher, right? Like if you think about balance, you may have just a little bit more of the stuff that's not bringing you joy than the stuff that is. And so again, it's going to look differently for everyone as far as what the external signs are, but the internal signs are you're clearly not loving what you're doing. You're frustrated, you're tired, you're stressed out. It could be a physical health marker for you, like you have a pit in your stomach all the time. Maybe you're moody and irrational and irritated. I mean, there's a lot of signs, but at the end of the day, it's like you don't have hope. You don't have any sort of drive or motivation to do the things that you should be doing. That could be the biggest sign of burnout.
Yeah, for sure. And, to personally experience burnout is a lot to handle. I think for me to see others experience burnout and feel like there's no hope there, that for me is the piece that I feel the most. What are some ways that loved ones can approach their loved ones that they might think are in that burnt out stage?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I think it's going to be again, it's different for everybody. For me, I need alone time. And, I have the genius, the working genius assessment of wonder and discernment. And the ways that my cup gets filled is by giving me alone time where I can daydream and I can think freely and uninterrupted and just really just be by myself. And again, that also comes with my personality type of being an introvert, right? An introvert is someone who gets recharged by being alone. And again, I didn't know those things about myself. And so having that conversation with my husband, and he knows those are my personality types. Those are the things that I need in order to feel energized or recharged, or what I need in order to like decompress. If he knows that about me, maybe he doesn't actually have to approach me. Maybe he just knows I'm just going to be proactive here. I'm going to take the kids to go do something, and I'm going to let Kacee have the day to do whatever she needs to go do. Right. And so I think before you go and approach someone, you need to know more about them. Right. Like if you're supporting them in the wrong way, it could almost be more hurtful than helpful. And so I would just give you an opportunity to evaluate like 2 steps before you get to the point where you want to approach them. And actually, the ladybug just landed on me. Sorry, it kind of scared me. But I would say take 2 steps before you approach them and say, like, what is the thing that I'm getting ready to say to them going to trigger them and make this worse? Or is what I'm going to do going to actually be helpful? And so I think getting to know that person and understanding what their actual needs are by asking them, that's the first step that you can do, is what do you need? Instead of going at, here's how I can solve this problem, it's more so just saying, what do you need? What can I do to help you? Right. And I think so many of us want to solve, right? Like when my husband comes up with an idea, I instantly have a decision of whether that's going to work or not. I instantly want to say, well, here's what you need to do next. He's not actually looking for that from me. He just wants me to listen to him. He just wants me to hear them around his idea because he loves coming up with new ideas. He doesn't actually need me to vet them for him. And I think the same concept can be said around burnout, right? And how we're supporting someone and whatever mental health thing that they're dealing with, or even physical thing, right? Before we go and try to solve someone or try to solve the problem for them, asking them what they need can make or break the entire thing.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before about being curious. I think it's okay to be curious about people that we know. We might think we know them or think we know what they need, but have we ever asked? And that expectation piece, we have that expectation that we think we know them, but people change, people grow. And the thing that you are doing, like you said, could be rubbing them the wrong way. And they're just too nice to tell you, which is, nice of them to not tell you, but it's also a detriment to that relationship and to really be working towards that goal of people being okay and feeling okay to express their feelings and emotions, especially in agriculture, because again, we think of the rough and tough, like salt of the earth people that are farmers, and we think we can get through anything because how many generations before us did that? But we live in an age now where we have access to so much information that it's absolutely mind-blowing. And to know that that information is out there, to know that our feelings are valid, and to know that there's explanations to things and we have access to learning about those, I just think that we are doing ourselves a disservice by not being curious about the people that we love and the people that we work with and the people that we know.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And I think even on the flip side here is, again, get curious about yourself, right? Like before it even gets to the point of so-and-so needs to pay attention to so-and-so and try to figure out how to support them because they're burnt out, it's what can I do to be proactive before I get to the burnout point? And that is the work that I like to do, is how can we manage this, that all the things that you're doing, so that way you don't get to burnout.
So good.
And that's a you thing.
Yes. Right? That's when we get to look in the mirror and we're like, oh,
Yeah, that's the hard truth.
that's the hard part, right? To look in the mirror and be like, oh, this is part of the problem here. I would be remiss not to talk about the other B word in agriculture that I find lots of people feel it's difficult to navigate. And that is boundaries. Not only personal boundaries, family boundaries, all of the boundaries, but many in the farming community struggle with setting boundaries between work and home life. What are strategies that you've recommended to folks in the past in dealing with boundaries?
This is one of my favorite topics. And I didn't actually know the difference between boundaries and requests until just a couple years ago. And there is a big difference. And so I think it might be helpful to define those before I say, here's what you can do. Because I think the reason why we feel people are crossing our boundaries is because we actually didn't set a boundary. So the difference between a boundary and a request, right? So a boundary is something that I am setting, that I am saying, this is what I'm willing to do or not willing to do. I do not have to get permission or approval by anybody else in order to set a boundary. And I'm going to pause on that for a second because that is probably going to blow some people's minds. I do not have to get approval by anybody to set a boundary, whether that's a work boundary, personal boundary, whatever. I don't have to get approval. This is something I'm willing to say. It's a non-negotiable. Don't need your permission. A request, on the other hand, is something that I can ask of somebody else, and they have the right to say yes or no, and vice versa, right? Somebody else is setting a boundary. They don't need approval from me. I can cross it, right? I can say, okay, I want to bring up this topic, and they can say, whoa, I don't want to talk about it. They get to decide whether they cave on their boundary or not. And the same thing with a request, right? I can ask something of you. You have the ability to say yes or no. You can ask something of me. I can say yes or no, right? So there is a difference between a boundary and a request. And I think that right there is going to help a lot of people go, oh, that makes sense, because we've interchanged those two words. So in order to set really effective and clear boundaries is to define what your boundaries are. What are you willing to do, not willing to do? What are you willing to talk about? What are you willing to take action on? What are you willing to feel about something, right? Those are things that you do not need approval or permission by anybody else on. So defining what your boundaries are and then communicating them is where it gets really fuzzy, because most people just assume that you know that this is something I want to do or not do, right? And so the analogy I always like to use is a fence around a field, right? So just picture a square 40-acre field. You've got a fence around the edge. The fence is the boundary marker. It's going to clearly define what's supposed to be inside, protected, kept safe, responsibility. And on the other side is maybe not your responsibility. Maybe you're trying to keep things out, right? Some fields have legitimate fences around them. It's clear, it's communicated. There's no mistake. Some fences don't, and it's a GPS type of fence. And so that's the boundary marker. We know that marker is there, but the deer or a trespasser, they're not sure what that boundary marker is. So the communication is the thing that puts the physical fence there, right? We can put gates wherever we want inside of that fence row. We could have 100 gates, right? To open and close when and wherever we want, to access wherever part of the field that we need. We get to choose that, right? That's the communication piece. But here's the kicker. If you don't define and communicate your boundaries, somebody else is going to. And so that's my biggest piece of advice, is just start there. Figure out what you're willing to do or what you're not willing to do. Figure out what your boundaries are and then communicate them. And then the final piece is obviously stick to them because they're important to you.
Absolutely. And I've loved how you have described that. And I've heard, I think essentially everyone's going to have their own vision of what setting a boundary will look like, or how you can effectively set a boundary. But the way that you've explained it makes sense to me. And like you said, if you're not willing to have that communication piece and set that boundary, somebody else will do it for you. And that never feels good. Never.
No, it doesn't. And then you're left. Here's where this analogy came from is we've got this property that butts up to our neighbors and it's wooded, but there's probably like 7 feet of like grass in between the woods and the field. And the field is the neighbors. And every year it seems they get 1 row further into our grass. And we added up along the whole entire perimeter of our woods how much acreage of land they're actually farming that's ours. And it ends up being like right around 1 acre total around the whole entire perimeter. If you add in like 4 rows plus the length, it ends up equaling about 1 acre. And over time, you don't notice it, right? Like, oh, okay, 1 year they're 1 row in. Cool, whatever. I'm not going to squawk about them coming in 1 row further. Next year, they're 2 rows in. The next year, they're 3. You know what I mean? And it slowly starts to get closer and closer into your land. That's 1 acre of land that they're getting for free. Like you're taking, and maybe that's not a big deal. I don't know. But it's the principle that it's not yours. And you're crossing the boundary. I can say something about it and cause a big issue. Maybe they just don't plant that far over next year, or I can just let it go. I mean, it's totally my call, but I just have to be okay with whatever that call is, right? But it's just knowing where the boundary was and paying attention to it and noticing it, not all of a sudden one day waking up and they're planting next to the tree.
Right.
And wondering how the hell that happened, right? It's the awareness piece. So
Exactly. Kacee, we have just scratched the surface of all things Kacee Bohle. Can I ask you back for part 2 of this?
I would love to. This is so good.
Amazing. For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I am Ag Coach Kacee on Instagram. And then I also have a page on Facebook called Ag Coach Kacee. And then just Kacee Bohle on LinkedIn. Those are probably the most common places you can find me.
Perfect. And I will link all of those in the show notes at the end of this part 1. And we're going to dive into some more goodness right away here. Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.